or she is the best football expert on the planet.
I'm just playing for pride now. And my pride's gone.
We're very passionate people here.
Oh, well, I know.
We're ready to come for the W, yeah?
These girls will smoke you, man.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Mirror Gaming Walkthrough, the weekly gaming news show full of spicy takes and juicy gossip. I am gaming content creator at the Mirror, Aaron Potter, and joining me this week, I have a whole host of experienced professionals when it comes to the video game world. Making his grand return to the show is gaming content creator Lewis Barton. How you doing, Lewis?
Doing good, thanks. Yeah, great to be back. Been a few weeks since I last made an appearance, so yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, we thought we'd better bring you out of your FIFA cave and, let you show your beautiful face to the people because, they've been asked. There's been demand within the YouTube comments, I'm sure. And then making his grand debut on the Mirror Gaming Walkthrough this week is none other than Scott McCrae. He is a gaming freelancer who helps us out at Mirror Gaming on the regular. Scott, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good, thanks. I'm ready to escape the news mines and make my face seen for couple hours at least, so excited to get going.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you being here to join us, and obviously, I just want to clarify: we don't lock our professionals away in the mines to just dwell on video game news stuff all the time, but we do let them out of the cave every so often. But we got a great Mirror Gaming walkthrough for you this week. Obviously, I am not Nathan Bliss. I'm Aaron Potter. Nathan unfortunately cannot be here. He's probably too busy playing FIFA. Maybe Lewis can attest to that. But we are streaming on YouTube as well as Facebook this week. So if you've got a comment for us, feel free to leave it in the comment section below, and we'll happily read it out on the show where you can be part of it. Of course, I can already see there's some people having a discussion. So excited, keep it coming. But on this week's edition of the Mirror Gaming Walkthrough, we've got lots of juicy gaming news stories to dip into. It was a big week in the world of video games, headed up by, of course, Elden Ring DLC being confirmed by From Software. Very exciting because I know people have been waiting a long time for that. And then elsewhere, we're going to be running through the recent PlayStation Sony State of Play, in which we got our first extended look at Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And obviously, that was our first proper look. So we've got plenty to discuss there. And obviously, we've got Lewis Barton, the resident FIFA gaming expert, or EA Sports FC, as it is soon to be called, to update us on everything happening in the world of EA's prestige football gaming series. And then finally, if we've got time, it's been a few weeks since we've discussed anything The Last of Us in terms of the HBO show, and obviously episode 7. We're nearing the finish line for the first season of HBO's The Last of Us, so we're going to have a bit of a recap. We've got people on the pod that have played the game, some who haven't, some who've only watching the TV show, so we've got all kinds of perspectives. But of course, we're not going to bury the lead for the Mirror Gaming Walkthrough this week. We're going to kick off with the biggest headline act, and that is, of course, news that Elden Ring DLC has been announced. It's still a way off, though, and it's keeping fans excited, especially since there was a recent live stream and it skipped it there. So after a year of speculation, developer From Software has announced via Twitter that Elden Ring's first DLC expansion is in development. Named Shadow of the Emerald Tree, it's coming to PS5, Xbox Series X, and also, surprisingly, PS4 and Xbox One. So they're not leaving last gen behind just yet. Obviously, no official release date was given, but it was a surprise to see the DLC announced almost a week following the official anniversary live stream. There's plenty more details to discuss, but I want to get the guys' instant reaction. Scott, I know you're the resident Elden Ring expert. You've played the game, you've sunk some hours into it. What was your reaction to Elden Ring finally getting its DLC announcement?
I mean, it's long overdue. I say that, but this is the biggest game they've ever made, and usually I think Dark Souls 1 was exactly a year, Dark Souls 2 was a few months, Dark Souls 3 was about a year. So this is the longest we've ever waited for any DLC to a From Software game, but hopefully that makes it all the more better. Like, they are lengthy expansions usually, but for how huge Elden Ring is normally, I'm excited to see how they can improve on what they've done already and see if they can keep that kind of what made the first game so special within the DLC.
Yeah, can I ask, like, how many hours are deep into Elden Ring? I imagine you've played it quite a lot, or do we not want to know, judging by the look on your face there?
Let's say over 100.
Wow.
150 maybe.
Well, we've definitely got the right person on the
Sure.
podcast this week then.
Slowly creeping up more and more every time you ask him this question.
I can find the actual number, but I don't think I want to. So we'll say 130. Let's say.
130 hours. I think the last game I put that kind of clockage into was the original Destiny. Obviously, there's busy things happening in the world of Destiny this week as well. But Lewis, give us a bit about your background with Elden Ring and Souls-likes in general, and sort of how did you take the news that it's fine? You know, this massive game, easily the best-selling game of 2022, is finally getting its DLC.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's been a long time coming, I feel. And I think it's something which is going to keep the fans happy. Just from the first look of it and the artwork, I think it's enough to get people excited. Definitely, yeah.
Awesome, yeah, and I can already see, obviously, since the announcement was made, you know, the Elden Ring community are already having at it in terms of theories and speculations. And we've got Gigi on YouTube here in the chat asking, any theories on the DLC? And is a good one. And obviously, as you just heard, Scott, our own resident Souls-like expert, has put 130 hours ish into the base game. So, Scott, you've been looking through the Reddit threads this week, seeing what people are saying. Obviously, we got some official artwork, but other than that and the name, there wasn't much else to go on. So either what theories have you been able to read, or maybe you've got some theories of your own?
So the name Shadows of the Erdtree, it implies that something's going on with the Erdtree. If you've played the game, you'll know that, and then maybe it probably should be about 2 hours, took me about 20 hours. The Erdtree gets burnt down and it kind of has lasting effects on the entire map. But I've seen a lot of speculation that the tree shown in the artwork isn't going to be the Erdtree at all. It may be Michaela's Hague tree, or it may be the name escapes me, but a tree that was hinted at within a single item description, the Black Lamplight tree, which is not mentioned in the game at all, except for the description of one single item. And then the other thing is, in the corner, you see someone that looks like Michaela himself riding Torrent, which is the player horse.
Yeah, I don't know if we've got producer Will with us on the stream. I don't know if he's able to bring up that artwork image, but you were. I think you were one of the first to point out that is Michaela riding the horse Torrent there.
Yes. So when you get Torrent, you get given a bell that belonged to Torrent's former owner. So people are speculating that because of this artwork, that would have been Michaela, who, I hope I'm saying that right, doesn't show up in the game at all, except for the opening cinematic. The only time you actually see him in the game is during another boss fight where he's stuck in a cocoon.
Right.
Now, Souls, I don't know if it was Dark Souls 2 DLC, but there's definitely something in Dark Souls 2 where you go back in time. And then Bloodborne's DLC is set back in time as well. So there's the other theory that this could just be like set earlier in the world, when Michaela was still roaming.
Oh, okay. So it might be a changed map then. Yeah.
And like you said with the map there, do you reckon the DLC will make any new areas available to explore, or will it likely reuse the current locations?
Yeah, I don't know. Scott, do you have any theories with that?
So it's weird. Elden Ring is kind of unprecedented. There's not as much to kind of go off of when you compare it to the older games. In the older games, it was new areas. And I can only hope that how long this has taken means that we will get a brand new, maybe like 5 or 6 areas for the expansion. I could see them throwing some new bosses in the normal map as well, maybe some new dungeons, but it'll probably be a new area that you'll access with the dumbest kind of combination possible. I believe Dark Souls 1, you had to find a random wall and roll through it. For Bloodborne, you had to stand in a specific spot and ring a bell. So, it'll probably be as much of a game finding the DLC as it will be to actually play it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's almost like a Destiny raid in that way, where it's the onus is on the players to kind of work everything out. Not being a Souls-born guy myself, I've not yet dumped into Elden Ring, but I just think there's something both cool, but maybe slightly annoying as well to those instances where it's like, well, I've got access to the DLC, but A, am I higher level enough to access it yet? And B, how do I find it in the first place? But obviously, I think Elden Ring appeals to a particular type of player that just like finding the devil in the detail. Like you said, the black lamplight tree was mentioned in just one item description. And yet, potentially, From Software are using it to announce the DLC for the first expansion. I think the fact that they're calling it an expansion means that it's going to be definitely quite sizable, but it is coming relatively later than I would have expected, because I think previous DLCs, as you were hinting at earlier, Scott, they kind of tend to come within the same year, like Bloodborne and Dark Souls. I think they work that way. So for now, for From Software to only just announce the DLC a week after the game's 1-year anniversary without a release date, I'd be surprised if we get it as early as this summer. And just my gut, purely from looking at numbers past, I think they could be targeting a winter release. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Scott, being an Elden Ring aficionado.
So the fact they've announced this as just that piece of art on a tweet on like a Tuesday morning out of the blue maybe seems to imply that this was just kind of a please shut up about the DLC. It'll be ready when it's ready. We're making it. Here you go. So, I mean, I have to imagine that's what they've been working on for the last year. But again, this could be huge. So it may be a case of winter. At the earliest, I think we're talking September, but probably late in the year, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, we've got gaming editor Nathan joining us in the YouTube chat there with his opinion on Elden Ring. Nathan, you should be sitting this side of the camera. Nathan says, I'm loving Elden Ring, rocking the Bloodhound Fang. Didn't they have a hit in the 90s? I'm pretty sure they did. But only just defeated that pesky witch. When is it worth getting the DLC? And then we've got Gigi in there telling Nathan that, 32 hours, rookie numbers. I mean, for a game that size, Gigi, you're probably along the right lines, but I don't want to get fired either. When is it worth jumping into the DLC, though? So, Scott, apologies keep coming to you, but obviously you're the Elden Ring man. So do these DLC, do they tend to work where they are definitely post-game, or you can jump into them at any point?
For full clarity, the only DLC I've actually played is the Dark Souls 1 DLC and the Bloodborne DLC. I never played 2 or 3, so I couldn't speak to where they fit in. In Dark Souls 1, it's recommended you do it towards the end of the game. Same with Bloodborne, but with Bloodborne, it's like... Actually, with both games, sorry, it's like 3 or 4 areas. So, you can dip in, get some of the DLC weapons, and then come back to the main game, and then come back when you're like fully stocked up. So really, it's just a case of, find it. If you keep getting beat, probably wait until you're a bit closer to the end of the game. Again, Elden Ring, you can continue to explore the world after you beat the game, which isn't the case in Dark Souls and Bloodborne. So, it's a lot easier to just wait until after. You don't have to worry. Once you've beaten the final boss, you can just skedaddle on in and probably get beaten down for the next 40 hours or however long it will take.
Wow.
I'm going to jump on the asking Scott a question train here. Aaron, you can feel
Go
free
for
to answer it as well. But, how long do we really think that From Software intends to support Elden Ring? Because with expansions, because it's such a big game, but do you think how many more expansions do you think they could add in the future before moving on to the next thing?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Go on, Scott.
So the Game Awards, I believe it was, when he was accepting his award and some random child appeared behind him.
I remember that, yeah.
He did say he wants to do more with Elden Ring. That's Miyazaki, the director of the game, and who did all the games, I believe, except Dark Souls 2, maybe?
Yeah, he didn't do Dark Souls 2. I think that's right.
So yeah, he said he wants to do more with Elden Ring. Whether that just means this DLC back, or will they keep doing more, is probably beyond me. It's been a huge success in a way that the other games hadn't been. I mean, they were successful, but they were never this big. So they'd maybe be leaving money on the table if they didn't. But at the same time, maybe one's enough. Maybe that's all they want to do creatively. And
Yeah, it's
sorry.
yeah, go for it, Scott. I think, well,
was
you're
saying-
just about GG in the chat brings up a good point. Obviously, coming for Scott Elden Ring Man's Crown, Sekiro got 0 expansions, so who knows what they've got planned for Elden Ring. But it's crazy popular, so it'd be mad not to cash in. And I can see the point that Gigi's getting at, but at the same time, Scott hints towards like I think there's like a purity to Elden Ring that the guys at FromSoft would be very, trepidatious to try and spoil. So the fact that we're getting what we're predicting is going to be a pretty sizable DLC expansion that potentially takes place years before the main campaign, I think they're already tempting fate a little bit. But having said that, I know that something like the Old Hunters with Bloodborne was like, really well received, so they definitely know what they're doing. But in terms of, how long they intend to support Elden Ring, I think as long as it's popular and for as long as they've got ideas that don't warrant putting into a sequel. Because the other thing I'll mention is that back at the Game Awards, as well as being joined by some random fan on stage who was shouting things about Bill Clinton, they also announced the new Armored Core game, which got people talking as well. And I don't think it's clear yet whether or not From Software is split into 2 teams, or if it's the same team moving from one project to another, whether Armored Core will be coming after the Elden Ring expansions are done. Scott, do you have any thoughts about where Armored Core might fit into this in terms of the From Software production timeline?
So Miyazaki isn't directing Armored Core. I just looked up there. It's Masaru Yamamura directing the game.
Nice job.
So he was the lead game designer on Sekiro. So presumably they have 2 separate teams. I could not say for sure, but I imagine because they went from Dark Souls 2 in 2014 to Bloodborne in 2015 to Dark Souls 3 in 2016. So, if that's one team, they're doing a lot of work, but I can't imagine that is. So they'll probably have one team on Armored Core just now and one team on whatever's next for Elden Ring, and then maybe a smaller team on whatever's next for anything, really. But for the Sekiro expansion, it's worth noting that was Activision. So there could have
They were
just
publishing Sekiro,
yeah, maybe they just didn't want more Sekiro. I mean, it was really successful. It also won Game of the Year at the Game Awards, so I couldn't really tell you what happened there, but it may just be a case of they didn't want DLC, but they wanted to do more with it because, Sekiro was big for them as well. Like, Sekiro was probably my favorite one. I could not tell you for sure. It changes every other week.
No worries. Yeah, now that you mentioned that, like, it's kind of incredible that we haven't got Sekiro 2 announced yet, and I do wonder if the Activision thing has something to do with it. But Nathan, gaming editor Nathan's in the chat again. He brings up a good point. How much are we thinking that the DLC for Elden Ring will cost? He says roughly around about £30. £30, that's probably about half the price for a full game these days. And obviously, if the full game is taking Scott roughly 130 hours to spend time in, that seems like it'd be good value, especially compared to other games out there. Lewis, do you think £30 for like a sizable DLC, roughly about 50 to 60 hours in length, is that an enticing prospect for you? I know you're not an Elden Ring fan, but just as a general gamer.
I think that sounds like a great deal personally, and it's one game of the year and stuff, and you're saying the full price game is £60 and you're getting 60 hours worth out of it. £30 seems like a bargain considering the price of some games and DLCs these days.
Yeah, I think you're totally correct. And then just to finish up the conversation, GG in the chat, still storming it. They posed the question, I wonder if we'll see an Elden Ring series to take over Dark Souls. And that's something that I've thought about pretty often as well, is that Dark Souls, or particularly the latter half of that moniker, Souls, is so ingrained within gaming now. Like, I saw a review go live for a game earlier this week, and you see the term Souls-like, thrown around pretty casually these days. I don't know. Elden Ring was a big game, and it's definitely the biggest game in that genre, but I'm not sure if it'll enter the gamer's vocabulary. I don't think we'll be seeing Elden likes anytime soon. Hopefully it stays as Souls likes, because Elden likes might imply something entirely different. Well, anyway, that's the Elden Ring DLC. Like I said, no release date just yet, but confirmed to be coming to PS5, Xbox Series, as well as PS4, PC, and Xbox One. So good on FromSoft as well for supporting last-gen consoles for those who haven't made the jump yet as well. Story number 2 on the walkthrough this week: Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Live service confirmed. I don't know. It breaks my heart if so. So as part of PlayStation's first digital state of play event of this year, Rocksteady has finally lifted the lid on what players can expect with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League when it arrives later this year. Set in the Arkhamverse as Rocksteady's Batman trilogy, the same one, the skills of all 4 characters were shown off alongside the much-rumoured Battle Pass, which many players feared would see the game skew closer towards a live service title than a traditional single-player game. Although Rocksteady has confirmed that the game can be played solo, but that an internet connection would be required to play at all times. Also shown off was each character's power level, upgradable gear system, and the Battle Pass, where players can earn new outfits, emotes, and various other items to customize their characters. So Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. GG chiming in once again. That game looks god-awful. There, I said it. And I don't know if I'd go so far as to say god-awful, but Lewis, you checked out or you caught up on the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League stuff earlier today. Are you a fan of Batman games in general? Regardless, what were your first impressions seeing the gameplay footage? Oh, I think you're muted for a second, Lewis. Either that or you're being very, very quiet.
I just feel like how long it's taken to make this game, the gameplay was extremely underwhelming, and I think a lot of people can agree with me on that. Like GG said in the comments, I just felt like there was such high expectations for it, and just based off the 6 minutes gameplay they released alone, it's brought down people's expectations by quite a bit.
Yeah, I have to say it's definitely different to what I was expecting. I don't know if producer Will is able to show some gameplay as we're streaming live right now to give viewers a bit of an impression if they haven't seen it already. But I was always a massive fan of the Batman games that Rocksteady made. Arkham Asylum obviously changed the genre. It's still considered one of the best superhero games ever made. It's coming up now. And while this game does look fun for its own kind of reasons, it's clearly a very different approach. Scott, what's your opinion?
I don't.
And try and be somewhat positive if you can.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to be nice about this. It just doesn't look good. It looks. I don't know. I love Arkham Asylum. I love Arkham City. Those games have gotten worse with every single entry. Like Origins was okay. Night was bad. I didn't even touch Gotham Knights, but it looks. So yeah, this might be next in line and somehow be worse than Gotham Knights because it has the problem I think a lot of games do these days where they try to put so much into it without really thinking of how it would benefit the game. So I'm not to say that's on Rocksteady's behalf because they're obviously a really talented studio. And this game's obviously been in some form of development hell for 10 years since Arkham Knight, maybe. But clearly somewhere someone's been like, okay, we need to have a battle pass because that's cool. We need to have gear. We need to have levels. It probably has a Destiny cursor, one of my most hated things ever. What was the other thing? The hero-specific gears and all that. Like,
yeah,
who asked for all this? It just gives me a big smell of the Avengers game.
Do you remember in the Avengers game, Scott, when you could upgrade Hulk's ribs to make him stronger? Yeah. I think that was a new high point for pop culture in general when you were unlocking new sets of ribs for Hulk. Just have to say. But yeah, I mean, you make salient points. I wish we could have a more positive voice because I'm sure this is the type of game that would appeal to people. And obviously, it's 4-player online co-op. So much like other cooperative games, I know that I've had fun with like Borderlands in the past. I think you can get some fun out of it in that sense. But this is a canonical sequel. I think it's set around about 5 years later to Batman Arkham Knight. It sounds like I liked it a bit more than Scott, despite the back tank sections. But gaming editor Nathan chimes in as well with a salient point. Why can't anyone make a decent superhero game, he says. Bar Spider-Man, of course, feels like there's so much potential in that genre, particularly for Marvel rather than DC. And I totally agree. You have to think that particularly the guys at Xbox, Spider-Man being a PS4, PlayStation 5 exclusive game, that they're just kind of like looking over that fence and saying like, why can't we have that? Meanwhile, you've got Warner Brothers clearly trying to pivot over what began as like a live service entry. Because I think the interesting thing about Gotham Knights last year was it wasn't a good game. And even though you could play as 4 different Gotham Knights, you could only play as 2 at once as part of the campaign. And me and friends were excited about that game. There were 3 of us, but obviously one of us had to sit out whenever we wanted to play online. At least Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League doesn't seem to have that issue. But Lewis, why do you think, obviously, you're here, we're going to be talking about FIFA a little bit later. Is the allure of having live service elements in your game simply too strong to the extent that even with superhero games, we're seeing it come up time and time again?
I think so. Definitely. I think yeah, with this game, the reaction just has, since that trailer got released, has not been good, and that's one of the reasons. I think the fact that's one of the reasons why the feedback hasn't been so great. And what I don't like about this game so far, from what we've seen, is that it just doesn't look any different to a lot of superhero games we've seen. It had some interesting cutscenes. That's what, like, cinematic moments in a way, but the gameplay itself, I think, fell flat. So yeah, it's not one I'm looking forward to, but like you mentioned there, I think that's something we see too often nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. And I think whenever you can see people like this is a current gen only release, is coming to PS5, Xbox Series X, and for people to be comparing it to the likes of Crackdown and something Gotham City Imposters, if you can remember that online game, it's not really the kind of dialogue and conversations you want to hear about your next big budget game from Rocksteady, which is one of the most celebrated superhero game developers. GG in the chat again. The first Batman game was great. I think they're referencing Arkham Asylum there. It went downhill after that in terms of DC. I think you may be being a little bit too harsh. I mean, people do love Arkham City despite the expansion as well. So the game's been in development, as you've mentioned, Scott, for almost 10 years. And it's clearly had a troubled development, if you were to ask me. It started off as one thing, potentially changed to another. Just in general, Scott, do you think it's been worth the wait? No words.
I just sat and slaughtered the game for a good 2 minutes straight, and you're like, are you happy with the wait? So try
and put yourself in the shoes of like other people potentially as well. The game might not be for you, but surely it appeals to someone.
I don't think this has actually been in development for 10 years, because I remember you would hear rumors that they were doing a Nightwing game next, they were doing a Court of Owls game, there was a Suicide Squad game coming. I can't remember if it was them or if it was the other team, the ones who did Gotham Knights. But I remember hearing about that, and then after the movie flopped, they gave up on it and somehow have brought it back. But I think after people's problems with Arkham Knight, which, again, you like, I think they had to kind of make a big splash, especially when it's been this long. And this just doesn't look like it. And obviously, the next logical step would have been like Justice League or something like that, and they kind of got some of that in here. But I'm also a bit upset. That's maybe not the right word, but I'm not exactly happy that this is in the Arkham verse. Like, we've got Kevin Conroy's final performance as Batman. We've got this great universe that in 3 months' time, or whenever the game comes out, will be probably wiped by some Flashpoint nonsense. Kevin Conroy's final Batman, he's probably going to get killed off as a joke from like Captain Boomerang or something stupid like that. And it's like, it just feels like a waste of everything that they've built up over the years. And I could be wrong. I could play the game and love it. But from where I'm at now, it looks disappointing. And to kind of go back to Nathan's point, you can make a good superhero game nowadays, but because they're the biggest movies, they're so huge, they're biggest TV shows at this point, no one's giving a chance to these kind of smaller teams. We had Midnight Suns in December, and yeah, sure, it flopped, but it was a great game because they let a smaller team give a take on a superhero game rather than we need to get this AAA big budget Batman game, this big budget Spider-Man game, this big budget Wolverine game. you can make good superhero games. It's just the people in charge of making these decisions want a specific thing, like Avengers. You know,
Yeah, I think
I
it's
think
indicative of.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Lewis. Go on.
I was gonna say, I think, like Scott mentions, like that. I think it's the name that sells, obviously, and we've seen with the Boys TV show and the success of the most recent Suicide Squad film that people love of superhero gone bad, storyline. So I think that there's no doubt an audience will be there when it gets released. But I can see people quickly not turning against it, but if it's anything like the gameplay shown, getting bored quickly, moving on.
I also think it's a Suicide Squad game where you kill the Justice League. Now that concept on its own is interesting, but then they're like, oh, by the way, they're actually brainwashed by Brainiac and you're actually saving the world. Have fun. It's the same problem with the first Suicide Squad movie. Just let people be villains. Let people be bad. They don't need to save the world. There doesn't need to be a world-ending crisis. Just let them do something. Peacemaker, the TV series, amazing. Like the best thing DC's put out, maybe ever, but definitely in the last few years. And that's not a story about how John Cena's going to save the world. It's just let's infiltrate a secret society of insect people, and it's just a small group of people messing about. Best thing I've seen on TV in the last couple of years, and I highly recommend that one. It's disappointing he's not in the game as well. It seems very like it's people from the original movie and King Shark. So it's like you can tell they had a different plan for where the series was at.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on the four selector? I was gonna say, yeah.
So have you all seen the latest Suicide Squad?
The James Gunn Suicide Squad movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved it.
So Deadshot's not in it. Sure, you got to have Harley Quinn in there, and then Captain Boomerang's in it for what, 2 minutes? Is he?
Spoiler alert.
Was he even in? Yeah, he was in it, but he was only in it for
He
2
is in
minutes.
it, yeah.
So it feels a bit dated now because obviously Deadshot was Will Smith's character in the movie, but then they had I believe his name was Bloodsport, who Idris Elba played, who is pretty much the exact same character. Guy who's good with guns, has a daughter who's troubled or
Estranged,
something like
yeah.
that. Yeah. So it just all feels a bit dated now. And I know they're going to bring new heroes in, but will I care in 5 months' time when they add Peacemaker or they add, I don't know, Polka Dot Man or anyone who was good in that new movie? It feels it's the same feeling I got with Avengers. By the time they added Hawkeye, or did they even add She-Hulk? I know she was meant to be coming, but it's too late at that point because no one cares anymore. And that's the other problem with these live service things. It's banked on what's to come rather than what's here.
Yeah, I think particularly when it comes to the villain lineup, you're absolutely right because obviously games take a long time to develop, and I think more so than most because it hasn't really had a clear vision of its own. And Suicide Squad is clearly aping from these other genres, be it the Avengers game or even something like as big as Destiny itself. It wouldn't surprise me if this was originally intended as a tie-in for the Suicide Squad movie, or Rocksteady had access to concept art for the original. I can't remember who directed it, David someone, the 2016 one starring Jared Leto, which we won't go into detail here, because I agree it is strange to see King Shark and Captain Boomerang and all these it's kind of cool that they're B-list characters, but at the same time I don't want to give Rocksteady too much trouble for picking those characters, because obviously finding the fun and making 4 different move sets that are all equally interesting to play as it's no easy task. We don't have to speak about go on, Scott.
That's the other thing. Now, when you hear the name Captain Boomerang, what do you imagine his weapon of choice would be? Is it a gun?
Yeah, maybe.
They all use guns.
Yeah,
why
Captain Boomerang with a shotgun?
Yeah. Why is Captain Boomerang using a shotgun? That could have been a fun character. You could have had some Kratos kind of stuff where you're throwing boomerangs at people and having them come back. But no, he's got a shotgun.
That's the big my biggest disagreement with the game. It just looked like any other third-person shooting game. Everyone was flying and jumping, and it looked like something we've seen dozens of times before.
Yeah, and we don't have to speak about Suicide Squad specifically. There are other state of play announcements we can go through, but the last thing I want to say is that's a crying shame is that the always online connection for these live service games. Rocksteady did their best in that behind the scenes video, showing us that it can be played solo with bots controlling the other characters, so it's very still much a group time game. But Scott, you mentioned earlier, and you're bang on that this is Kevin Conroy's last recorded appearance ever as Batman, not just in movies, TV shows, or games, ever, as far as I understand it, unless there's another DC animated film coming out with him in, but I don't think there is. So the fact that one day this game will not be able to be played offline. So if you go into a store, you buy a disc, you're never going to be able to play it. And Redfall got a lot of heat for this earlier this year, and I completely agreed with it then. Were Redfall not coming to Game Pass, I probably wouldn't play it because I don't want to play a game that when I invest my money in, I know, however in many years, it's going to be worthless, or if my internet connection is not strong enough, why bother playing it at all? So yeah, the internet connection thing is something I have a real issue with as well. Yeah. Nathan is piped up again in the chat. He says, with the huge Marvel films particularly, there's so much lore that can't be explored. You think that games could pick up some of that and run with it? The Mephisto stuff from Loki, for example. And I kind of feel for the creators on this side because these comic book universes, there's so much to pull from. And even though you've got more time to spend in a game than you have in just a 90-minute movie, condensing that into something that's logical and cohesive still is a challenge, I would say. Yeah.
So that's part of why I liked Midnight Suns so much, because you got the chance. Has anyone here heard of Nico Minoru? Or, I mean, we know Magic because she's an X-Men character, but like all these like weird B-tier Marvel characters, but it's like the most interesting thing they've done. I mean, Spider-Man's obviously cool, but it's like, as a boilerplate AAA game, it's good, but it's very much one of those, But you wouldn't see like a Midnight Suns game, and even then they had to have the Avengers in it, which is the worst part of that game, to be honest. But there are so many things you can do with these universes. There's so many cool characters you can pull, and they're pulling Deadshot and Harley Quinn. I mean, Harley Quinn's good, but you know what I mean.
And Captain Boomerang shooting the shotgun's obviously very good. Scott.
He's good.
Yeah,
big fan of Captain Boomerang.
Yeah, but again, you've already answered your own question, because Midnight Suns, great game. I played it for a couple of hours. I've just been so busy with other stuff, not had a chance to play it. But I did like dipping into these side characters, and then we get a couple months later, and it underperformed. And then the creative director Jake Solomon's leaving the studio. There's no evidence that the two are directly connected, but I think there's a reason why you see developers become risk averse to these, delving in deeper and more nichely, and yeah, I think it's only going to continue with this live service stuff personally. So yeah, Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. I've yet to speak to someone who thinks it looks good, but if you exist, leave a comment in the YouTube section or on Facebook and we'll happily read it out and get your voice heard. But obviously the state of play had a lot more to show. There was a heavy PlayStation VR 2 bent at the beginning. But Scott, I know there was particularly some Capcom related games that excited you a fair bit in the state of play.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, Capcom was, I still liked them because I like these series, but they were not the best. They did all this like DLC on disc stuff, releasing 5 different versions of Street Fighter 4, just not using Mega Man or ruining Resident Evil. And in the 10 years since, it's amazing to see how far we've come. We've come from like complete rubbish to probably the best publisher in the world right now. Like, they seem to just do hit after hit, and Street Fighter 6 and Resident Evil 4 both look like they're going to be that again. Like, those two I'd be shocked if either of those weren't in my top 5 games of the year this year, just from looking at them alone. Just and especially after how, to go into Street Fighter first, I guess, after how Street Fighter 5 was at launch, it's so good to see like how much they seem to just be nailing it with 6. Like, I've played a bit of 6. I really like how it feels. I think all the new systems are great, but even then I've not had a chance to look at any of the single player stuff, and I've barely touched the online, but it's like it just seems incredible. Like, the only issue I have is the character roster, but that's mainly because none of my favorites have coming back, and they should be catering specifically to me at all times.
Is there no Vega confirmed yet, Scott? Because he was always my guy.
No,
he had the
he
long
can stay
reach.
away.
Oh no! Don't be doing my
And the
boy
bin.
Vega dirty like that.
It's like it's the entire Street Fighter 2 cast, which goes back to what we were just saying about superheroes. Now you can't really do the Midnight Suns. You have to put the Street Fighter 2 guys in there, but I do wish like there's 6 games you can pull from, or 6 series you can pull from. There's no one from Street Fighter 3. There's no one from Street Fighter 5, I believe.
Street Fighter 5. Yeah, Street Fighter 5 was a weird one because wasn't it PlayStation exclusive as well for the longest time? And Xbox players can finally get in on Street Fighter 6, which I think is going to be a huge deal. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about like Capcom. They've had great success with Resident Evil and Monster Hunter World. That RE engine, it can seemingly do no wrong. And at a time where almost every game is either made in Unreal or Unity is the other engine. I think Capcom are single-handedly proving that there's a way to create beautiful looking games on bespoke stuff. Lewis, you caught up a little bit on the state of play. Was there anything in there that intrigued you in particular, be that Street Fighter, Capcom related, or something else?
I mean, you know me, I'm all FIFA and Football Manager and esports and all that, football for esports. So personally, nothing stood out massively. That's just a personal preference. But I think Street Fighter has always been a game that I've been interested in, just never got around to playing. So that obviously drew my interest. But personally, not too much.
That's all right. That's right. Me and Scott need to rope you in on the Resident Evil train, because Resident Evil 4, they showed a new trailer. They confirmed that a special demo is coming and that Mercenaries mode is going to be available, presumably at launch. I can't remember if they've said if that's coming later or not.
It's post-launch.
It's post-launch. Thanks, Scott. But yeah, Resident Evil 4, shut up and take my money. Basically, there's nothing more I can say. It seems like they're doing everything right. It looks grittier, darker than the original, but in all the good reasons. This is a game that a lot of people consider to be, one of the best games ever made. And if Capcom's work with the Resident Evil 2 remake and their recent stuff on Resident Evil 7 and Village, Resident Evil 3 maybe not so much. Resident Evil 4 is looking great. And I remember at the beginning of the year, we had a round of previews drop and everybody said they loved it then. Scott, will you dive into Resident Evil 4 at launch, or will you wait a little bit later?
I've just muted myself, sorry. I'm day one. Day 0, I'll try and find an early copy if I can.
Little Resident Evil 0 Easter egg there from Scott. Not intentional, of course.
Don't want to think about Resident Evil 0. I'm sure people like it, just but yeah, no. When Resident Evil 3 first came out, the remake, obviously, all the rumors came out about a darker, grittier Resident Evil 4 remake, and to be honest, I was like terrified. Resident Evil 4's what makes it so good is it's almost the Devil May Cry of Resident Evil games, even though Devil May Cry itself was Resident Evil 4 originally. It's just so goofy. Like, Leon is so funny. He's got all these stupid one-liners. There's the where's everyone going? The bingo line.
Bingo?
In the start of it. It's just so dumb. It's like this B-movie kind of feeling to it. And that's what I love about Resident Evil 4 so much. Like, sure, revolutionized third-person shooters and all that, but it's just so funny. And it's weird. Every time I thought about it, I was like, no, I don't want this. They'll ruin it. It's one of the best games ever made for a reason. You don't need to touch it. But every time I've seen it, I'm just like, wow, like they're doing it. Like the gameplay demo they showed of the village section from the start of the game. Like, as soon as I saw that, I was all in day one. Like, I don't even need to see the new trailer to like be excited for it. But the new trailer also looks fantastic. Again, Capcom can do no wrong right now. So I'm excited to actually get my hands on this, and excited to see if they manage to do the same for Resident Evil 5, which has a steeper hill to climb.
Well, I guess we wouldn't want to dive too deep into that avenue. But first off, Resident Evil 4, any game that lets you block a chainsaw with a knife gets a thumbs up from me instantly. But I am equally interested to see where they go after the Resident Evil 4 remake. Because do you attempt to remake Resident Evil 5? I personally think they'd be much better off giving the original Resident Evil a remake, because we've never seen it from the over-the-shoulder perspective. Scott, I don't know if you've got any thoughts of that. It's okay if you haven't. I don't want to go down too much of a tangent on the Resident Evil train.
Code Veronica. I think everyone assumed that Code Veronica would be next, and now it's Resident Evil 4. I could also see Zero. I don't want it. I could see it. I don't know if they do Resident Evil 1. I mean, there's money to be made, so they probably will. But the Resident Evil 1 remake is already considered like one of the best remakes of all time, as is.
But it's a very different style of Resident Evil game, isn't it? And I think that for people, players of a particular generation, that tank controls aspect still puts people off.
Yeah, I've never beaten it myself. I can deal with PS1 stuff, but I'm not the best with tank controls. It'd be interesting to see, and obviously Resident Evil 2 and 3, the remakes, and Village, actually, they all take place within, not Village, Village takes place way after, but Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 all take place within like a week.
A couple of weeks, yeah.
And then Village, there was some new, like late in the game where you play as Chris Redfield, you go into a lab.
Oh, you're spoiling every game today, Scott, I must say, yeah. I mean, that game is like, over a year old.
I think it's not like 2 years, 3 years now.
But you're forgetting the PSVR 2 version's just come out, so someone might be jumping into it for the first time.
Well, spoilers for a minor collectible that you find late in the game. There's some lore stuff in there that pertains to the original Resident Evil that's quite interesting.
Yeah,
there are seeds there to be, to make a good Resident Evil 1 remake, but I'm not sure if it's necessary. But then again, I didn't think Resident Evil 4 was a necessary remake. But no, I don't think they go for 5 either.
And they're proving us wrong with all these remakes. But anyway, that was the Sony State of Play recap from us. Again, a little bit down, well, perhaps more than a little bit down on Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, but hopefully it'll appeal to someone. And who knows, there's still a couple months to go. Rocksteady might show us something that changes our opinion. But moving on to the next headline we have for you today, and the main reason why Lewis Barton is on the podcast. He's been very quiet on the horror game front. I'm not too sure if survival horror is his bag necessarily. But EA Sports FC, it's coming later this year. The final FIFA is no more. FIFA 23 was the final FIFA. So FIFA 23, as it stands, is entering its final few months, with the 30-year partnership between EA Sports and FIFA ending following FIFA 23's conclusion. EA has confirmed that they will release a brand new football game called EA Sports FC, which instantly rolls off the tongue. But as of now, the name of the game is all that we really know. So that being said, we've managed to pull Lewis away from his usual FIFA duties. And this is the part of the show where me and Scott, beg your pardon, are just going to pepper him with questions. So Scott, what do you want to ask Lewis about EA Sports FC? What is your one burning question? And I'm sure he's ready to answer.
So this is where you become the Elden Ring expert. And
exactly,
bombarded with questions.
How the turns have tabled, as Michael Scott would say.
So what do you think the Air Tree has to do with? I'm kidding. Do you think that this is, obviously all we know is EA Sports FC, is this going to be EA Sports FC 24? Or do you think this is going to be like EA Sports FC and then next year there's going to be the 24 update, the 25 update, and it'll just be one live service kind of platform, the way you have Fortnite and Warzone and all that? What do you think is going to happen there?
So as of now, all we actually know is that their new game will be called EA Sports FC, and that is literally it. They've released nothing else apart from a really limited graphic, just going through, it's FC in different fonts with different teams who are licensed from the Premier League, La Liga, etc. So there's no number in the title, which is very different to what you had in the past. Obviously, FIFA's always had the year follow it in the title. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. In my opinion, that sort of hints towards that they could go down the live service route where they'll release like a yearly update, which will bring in new player ratings in Ultimate Team, the kits and all that, because a lot of games are going down that route now. And with the fact that, it is just called EA Sports FC, adding a number onto that doesn't sound appealing at all. The name itself already isn't the greatest name. I think both of you can back me up on that. It's like you said earlier, Aaron, it doesn't roll off the tongue. But I think a game where sort of a live service where it gets a yearly update will be something completely new. But I think it will be very welcomed by the community.
So just as a kind of follow-up there, how do you think they monetize this? Do you think it's going to be, because obviously it's EA, they're about their money. FIFA probably makes the most money of any game, I imagine.
GTA 5, maybe? But I agree with you, Scott.
Yeah. Well, year to year anyway. So obviously, if they go the one game platform, they're losing out on 70 quid every year, or not 70 quid alone, like countless 70 quids. So how do you think they make the difference? Do you think they go more aggressive with, because obviously you can't do like customization, you're not going to have the John Cena crossover or Rick and Morty and Goku showing up in FIFA. So what do you think they do to kind of make that money back if they do go the live service route?
Personally, I think it will just be a very expensive update each year. I think it will probably be the same price as buying a new game, except it won't be a new game with a new title. It would just be an update where you can get, every year you'll have every team gets a new kit. They'll get new players. There's new leagues. So I think it would just be a yearly update where you pretty much pay the full price of what you pay for a normal FIFA title, and it's the same game. I can't see them being too creative with it, or going down in price. And like you mentioned, there's collaborations. This year was the first year we saw like a big collaboration with FIFA collaborate with Marvel for Ultimate Team, which was very surprising. And I wouldn't be surprised to see stuff like that happen again in EA Sports FC. And the thing is with the partnership, with the separation, from FIFA, is that it was a bit of a blaming game. EA sort of said that the FIFA title held them back from being creative, whilst FIFA came out sort of, saying the same thing about EA. So it'll be really interesting to see who was at fault, because there's been so many demands from players towards EA each year that aren't listened to. So fans are hoping, me as well, that it was FIFA who were blocking out EA from being creative, and we can get a really, personal game which appeals to players this year. But like you said with the monetization, I think it will be a yearly release which costs a pretty penny. And I think they'll continue pushing, FIFA points in game, which have had a bit of controversy in the past because of how much they cost and how much everything is in the Ultimate Team is based on buying points. But I can see that continuing, maybe even being bigger than before. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we've got obviously gaming editor Nathan usually hosts this show, and he's a big FIFA player, similar to yourself, Lewis. He's popped up in the chat again with a very good question. What would happen to FIFA Ultimate Team if it went live service? The amount of cards they release, do you see these cards being on a transfer market for years after? Or, because as I understand at the moment, with every new annualized release, EA just wiped the slate clean, and every cent or dollar that you've invested in creating the FIFA Ultimate Team, you have to start from scratch. So by going live service, does EA risk making less money, or is there a way for them to work around that? What do you think?
Personally, I think it would just be the same as it is. They'll just wipe the slate clean again. It'll be sort of like a whole new game, but it's just a way to keep the title the same every single year. Because again, I think it's a naming issue. EA Sports FC 24. It just sounds so bad. So yeah, I can see them just, wiping the slate with Ultimate Team, starting from scratch again. If there was a way where they wouldn't do that, and there was a way for whatever you invest to stay invested over a long period of time rather than every year. You know, if you've paid £200 in points over 1 year, then just losing all of it, that would be fantastic. But again, I think that will stop EA from making money in a way. They'll make big losses on that. If you put £200 into the game in August, and then next year in August, that £200 still has value. Yeah, that won't work. That won't work with EA. So I can see it being something similar to how it currently is.
We've got another YouTube comment from Adam L in the chat, who comes up with an idea of his own in terms of how cards are handled. Maybe leaning on the Hearthstone side of things. Maybe a card crafting system where you can scrap cards for 5% of the value or something, like in other card games like Marvel Snap and like Hearthstone games like that. Do you think that's something that EA would go for?
It's a really good idea, a really creative idea that I think a lot of fans would be on board with. But from my perspective, I can't see EA doing that. I feel like they make so much on current FIFA titles with the way it is. I feel like any sort of situation where anything gets wiped, or sorry, anything doesn't get wiped, and they'll lose money. They'll lose money. I'd love to see something like that where cards don't just disappear. They can get recycled. They can somehow, it could be like an idea of when you get a card at the beginning of EA Sports FC, it starts at quite a lower rating, and each FIFA it can build up, but it's just how they go about that, the logistics. I don't know how that would work. But yeah, I still think it will be a wipe the slate clean sort of situation.
So Nathan's actually said something in the chat I want to bring up. He says, what ways do you think FIFA have been holding EA back, if that is the case? And then also, who do we think FIFA partners with next? Is it going to be 2K? Is it going to be someone else? 2K's going to be making like a Lego football game or something like that, I've heard.
I keep seeing 2K FIFA 24 floated around. Like, I don't know where that rumor started. I think people think it's a natural fit, but yeah, Lewis, what's your take?
Yeah, I think with who FIFA go with to publish their next game, as of now, on like EA Sports, to announce EA Sports FC, FIFA have said nothing. So it could be, I know, right? They haven't got a publisher the way it is. So I think 2K is a name that floats around because they have so many sports games the way it is. So that's something which we could potentially see in the future, which it would be interesting to see. Like I said earlier, if their game comes out and it's got cross-playing pro clubs, if they make a pro club similar mode, if all the requests that fans have been making over the last 5-6 years are all going to the first FIFA game, it will be clear that it was EA who was holding FIFA back rather than the other way around. I think when EA made the announcement they were making the split from FIFA, they ended up saying the FIFA name was holding them back. I'm not too sure how that is personally, because FIFA is one of the biggest companies in the world, but actually I'm sort of contradicting myself now by saying that, because that name, there's probably things they might have wanted to do in the game which are not as sensible that FIFA didn't want to be associated with. So I feel like when we got that collaboration with Marvel this year, it's not often you get personalized sort of card. It was like what the collaboration was pretty much an item in FIFA, a card in Ultimate Team. The players were in the style of a Marvel comic, which is something we'd never seen before, and it went down really well with the community. And I just feel like EA could really take it less sensible without the FIFA title now, because I feel like FIFA would have a big say over what happens, because it's such a governing body, and that's the name you see on the box. You don't really see the EA Sports, you see FIFA. So I feel like they would have more of the say. So without that big name overlooking them now, it'll be interesting to see how creative they can get.
So, don't know if anyone can tell. I don't know anything about most sports games, especially FIFA. But I do know when 2K took over WWE, when THQ went bankrupt, there were, I'd say, maybe a few years of growing pains, but actually it's more like 10 years of growing pains. Last year's game is probably the first good one in a long time, but it does kind of bring up something interesting where it was hard to tell who was to blame why WWE was so bad. Was it Ukes, the developer, or was it on 2K's end? And then after everything that went down with 2K20 and they took the 2 years off, Visual Concepts made the new one on their own, and it's the best one they've made in a long time, like since the PS2 maybe. So it'll be interesting to see if if FIFA wants to get something on the shelves as soon as maybe this year, maybe next year, or if they take their time with it. Maybe they've learned their lesson from WWE, and make something actually good that people want to play and could be a genuine competitor.
Yeah. I understand what you mean with the WWE stuff, Scott, because I'm like I said, I don't play FIFA too much, but I really enjoyed the like PS2 era of the WWE games. Here Comes the Pain, Just Bring It, all those classic things. And then to see 2K sort of fumble it in ways that they did, to the extent that they basically had to skip a year and make an arcade version of a wrestling game. I can't remember what that game was called, but just because it's in instances like that where you see the cogs of the machine, like it doesn't stop. You can't delay it. Something has to come out, which I think is why Lewis's point about it potentially becoming a live service game will come with its own challenges, because suddenly there's some different expectations that come with a live service game. How often are you updating it? What extra content can you add over time? How are you keeping me engaged? All those sorts of things. And GG pops up in the chat again. But I think he's being a little bit jokey here, or they're being a bit jokey. Football Fortnite. Maybe EA goes in on a free-to-play football game with seasonal content. And I appreciate the Fortnite reference there, but correct me if I'm wrong, Lewis, but wasn't this a similar route to what Konami went down with Pro Evolution Soccer? And I don't remember it ending up too well for them.
Yeah, eFootball did not go well. I don't know what's even going on with that game anymore, because it just sort of fell off a cliff as soon as they changed that sort of that service. So I think EA will be looking at that probably and trying to think, what can we learn from how the mistakes they made. But yeah, it would be interesting to see. I think, a live service sort of seasonal upgrade that would work football wise, because you have the football seasons. You have every 9-10 months or so a season, and 9 months a season will restart, and that could be put into a video game form. But there's so many things and expectations that people have for this upcoming game that we want to see. Personally, I have like a list of things that I want to see, that I think if EA do that, it will do well. And I think I'd like to see them do it as a seasonal sort of pass sort of thing, where they give it seasonal updates. But it's just how they do that, and that's the one problem.
So you add Rick and Morty, you add Goku, Doomslayer, Kratos, you get them, you make them play football.
Yeah.
There you go, Bob Drunko, you've solved it. The biggest game of all time.
I think
Because when they announced the Marvel collaboration, that was the one question everyone had. Will Hulk be in a FIFA game? Could you have like Hulk as a defender, like in game? And it was a bit confusing at first. So when it got announced that it's just Marvel Comics are going to be designing a card, it was a bit underwhelming, but it's also really fun to see because it's something we've never seen before. And I think just from looking at how well that collaboration's gone down with the community, EA should definitely be open to collaborating more in EA Sports FC.
Part of me is like, Fortnite is obviously the biggest success story in games right now, but not everything needs to be Fortnite. I thought we were overreaching a little bit when Call of Duty had that Godzilla versus Kong event tie-in with Warzone. I'm no FIFA player, I'm no EA Sports FC player, but the thought of seeing Hulk as a defender going up against Ricky Lambert or something on the pitch. There's a reference for you, Lewis. Showing my ancient football knowledge now. But I think it's going to be very interesting. And similar to what I said about the Elden Ring stuff earlier, like Souls-likes are so ingrained in people's vocabulary now. FIFA Ultimate Team. It's been called FIFA Ultimate Team. What is it going to be called from here on out? Just Ultimate Team, I guess. But then you can't call it foot points.
Ultimate Team.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. I think when I've said it a few times today already. I'm describing it as FIFA players or FIFA. EA Sports FC players. It's such a long thing to say. Even the abbreviation will be EAFC. Like it just nothing sounds good with that name. So you never know. It could be they do the yearly release. They just trial EA Sports FC. They realize it doesn't sound good, and they'll try and find a new name. But I remember when it got announced, the split between them and FIFA. Me and Nathan were trying to figure out what name could it be given, and we couldn't think of any good ones really, because that FIFA name is so renowned. It's going to be hard to get away from that. I think. But yeah, Ultimate Team would just be Ultimate Team. I guess they'll just call it like Ultimate Team Points or just Points. They'll figure something out. I think. Yeah.
UT points, something. I don't know.
UT points, yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, when you lose that FIFA name, I think it's definitely going to be a loss. People look for that FIFA name on a well, not a box anymore. No one really buys discs, but you look for the FIFA name, don't you? So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Definitely.
Yeah, someone's grand's not going to know the inner workings of like FIFA and EA's Fallout. So if there's a new game with FIFA on the box and it's like eFootball level quality, someone's going to have like a bad Christmas, you know?
Yeah, I guess that was EA's, well, in retrospect, like biggest mistake was placing so much power in that FIFA name, knowing that they would never really have true ownership over it. But
Yeah.
I appreciate your insight, Lewis. It's the main reason, obviously, we brought you onto the podcast today. So thanks for letting me and Scott just pepper you about things which there's not a lot of information out there about at the moment. But hopefully, it's planned
Yeah.
to release this year, and we'll hear more soon. Nathan, gaming editor Nathan, I'll finish off on his point here because I think it's quite good. He says, I think it was all about the money. FIFA wanted too much money for the name to go on the game.
Yeah, I think they were
yeah.
asking for something like $1 billion for the naming rights, which they didn't pay. But then they have just agreed, reportedly, EA Sports have reportedly agreed a fee in the excess of, I think, 600 million for Premier League licensing. So it shows you that they have the money to spend, but it's just how do they do it. So if they're not going to splash out $1 billion on the FIFA name, I think obviously it's just showing you that they want to be disassociated with it, and maybe they are holding the back over after all.
A lot of money in football. Who knew? Yeah, definitely not me. Yeah, even the games. Cool. So that's EA Sports FC. Still trying to get used to saying that. But moving on to our final topic for the mirror walkthrough. Obviously, it's been a couple weeks now since we've discussed all things The Last of Us, but it's still been rolling on. The wildly successful HBO show, Pedro Pascal, the internet's favorite daddy for some reason. Not quite sure how that got started, but it's a double whammy recently because The Mandalorian debuted today. Not watched it myself, but The Last of Us truck rolls on. This weekend, we were treated to episode 7, Left Behind. And Matt, fortunately for regular viewers of the show, isn't here to complain about all of the audio tape woes. I'm not too sure how many he'd spot, but keep engaged on the Mirror Gaming TikTok for that, because he definitely pays attention, incredible detail to that. But here we go. Nice job, producer Will. Episode 7, Left Behind. Lewis, you've not played the games before, but you've watched the show. Scott, you've played the games but not watched the show. So we've got almost every perspective this week on the pod. Lewis, as the resident newbie, what stuck out to you for this week's episode?
Personally, I loved it. I know it hasn't got great reception compared to episodes so far, but I thought it was really good. I like how they're sort of diving into every main character's. I like this little spoilers thing. Yeah, they're diving into every character's backstory, and I think it's a nice way just to split up each episode. I think people have some issues with the pacing currently, saying it's moving too slow with all the cutscenes and looking into people's backstories. But personally, as someone who's not played the game, it's great. I think I not playing the game, you don't know these backstories. So for me, I think it's easier as if you've played the game. You have this expectation of what you think is going to happen or what you want to happen. So when it doesn't, you're sort of let down automatically. I found it a very tense episode to watch because it was obviously all these nice moments between the two. And you were always just looking in the background, waiting for something to happen, weren't you?
Yeah, like the Left Behind DLC, which this episode basically lifts pretty much wholesale, is revered amongst Last of Us fans. And before we get too deep, I just want to say, we've got producer Will coming in to lend us his thoughts about the episode as well. So thanks for hopping in, Will. Is this your first time on the podcast? Is this the first time your face has appeared?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, what a treat for people. I'm so excited. Before we go any further, though, Gigi in the chat says Pedro Pascal slander will not stand. And I agree. I'm a big Pedro Pascal stan. Do not worry. Do not worry. But Will, seeing as you've just jumped in, you've played the games before, I believe? Or the game?
No, I haven't. I haven't played the game. But I did enjoy the episode. I mean, Lewis has sort of touched on it there. I did have an issue with the fact that even without playing the game, from what you know about Ellie and from the sort of tone of the show in general, you know that she's going to get bit in this episode, and you know that something is going to happen to Riley. It's pretty obvious from the start, and it's confirmed when you see the infected. So I just couldn't focus on any of the character development, any of the context, anything that was being added in the episode as a whole, because I was just, anytime there's a mid shot, I'm looking behind in doorways, anything like that. And it's the same reason, like if you were watching a horror film and there was that sort of sequence where they're being tracked down a hallway or something, you wouldn't then have like important character development because you just wouldn't be able to concentrate on any of it. So I had an issue with sort of how tension was managed in this episode. It genuinely just took me out of the episode the entire time. But generally, I mean, this is the thing. I think you sort of the goalposts move a little bit. Where if this was just a standard episode before the season came out, you'd be like, this is a great episode of a very good adaptation. But because the standards are so high now, we're sort of like disappointed with what felt like quite an average episode just because of the start. But no, I enjoyed it. It was good.
Yeah, I just want to answer one of Adam's questions. We've got a lively YouTube comment section at the moment, so I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Adam says, is the whole season out yet? I want to fly through this season in one night. And no, this was episode 7 of a 9-episode season, so we've got 2 more episodes left, and it seems like both Adam and Gigi are waiting for the whole season to be out before the Now TV subscription trial can be used, and I see where you're coming from. Do not worry. But to be the bearer of bad news, Will, Lewis, it's great to hear that as people that haven't played the game that the episode worked for you. I played the game, enjoyed the DLC a lot. And for me, I just think, being in that arcade, because obviously the whole premise of the episode is you get to see how Ellie got bit, as you mentioned, Will, and sort of a bit more of her backstory and where she's coming from. It's revealed that Ellie is either gay or bisexual in this episode, which is also brought over from the game. I remember that being a very big deal at the time. So I'm glad to see that it crossed over and it's been adapted successfully. And I think that was a particular highlight for me, because knowing that in my head, I was kind of like impressed with Bella Ramsey's performance, just some of the slight looks that she'd give Storm Reed's character Riley, like throughout the episode. I'll let you chime in a second, Scott. Apologies, but I'm just interested to see from Lewis and Will's perspective, prior to the kiss moment actually happening, was there a hint that maybe there was more than friendship there? Did they put that across? Will's nodding, he's saying yes.
I think, yeah, you could tell. I mean, at first, obviously, as someone who's not played the game, this is the first time we're being introduced to the character Riley, and it starts. I was thinking, oh, they're great friends, aren't they? Yeah, she likes her a lot as a friend, and then it just, as it develops more, you can see there's little comments and subtle looks and stuff. So yeah, I think it's obvious as the episode goes on. You sort of saw it come in, but it was still one of those where it still surprised you when it happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd completely agree. The same thing. I thought the performance by the actor who played Riley, by the way, was brilliant. Like just the subtle little nuances of reacting to things, because it was such a character-driven episode. Obviously, it's a character-driven show, but in this, it was basically in real time, and there was so much nuance to the performance. Dipped and went into a complete variety of emotions. So it was really impressive. I thought they both did a great job.
And when Will mentioned earlier, you knew this would be the episode where you find out how Ellie got bit. I think I was proper on the edge of my seat when they first entered that building and they had the guy placed up against the wall looking like he was drunk and all that. And, I was expecting, he's going to jump out. I kept saying it to I was watching it with, this is it, it's going to happen. And it didn't. And you just, okay. So it kept you tense and on your seat the whole time, to the point where you were starting to think, oh no, it won't happen now. And then that made you even more sort of wound up thinking, when will it happen?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of time between when they revealed that that infected, that clicker sort of character was up against the wall, and then they kind of left it just long enough so that you'd forget potentially that he was around. Obviously, you knew that he was going to get bit. But my main issue with the episode, so I think I'm right in saying this, as the only person on the podcast who's played the game and is currently watching the TV show, Scott's played the game, hasn't watched it yet. The main issue for me, I've got nothing against the performances of the characters or the content that happened in between, but it was the whole framing device angle, because obviously at the end of the last episode, unless you've played the game, you know that Joel is in a bad way. He's injured. He can't look after Ellie anymore. And the episode kind of like opens with Ellie trying to care for Joel, which very much the reverse of those roles than what we're used to seeing. And I think even having like very little lines, Pedro Pascal proves he still carries that intensity in his eyes, that when he's grabbing Ellie and he's like, "You go, like leave me," basically. I don't think I think he might have said go, but just in his eyes, I could tell like what he was telling her to do. And there was at least a couple points in the episode where it just felt really, it brought me out of that Riley Ellie relationship whenever we would flash back to the present day. So I think from that sense, as someone who's played the game, it made it very obvious that this was kind of like a DLC sort of side story that we were seeing, a bottle episode, some might say. But I'm really glad that you enjoyed it, Will and Lewis. Scott, as someone who's not seen the TV show yet, I'm interested in terms of the DLC. What are you hoping to see from the episode, or what do you hope will have been translated? And we'll happily let you know if it is.
So I guess listening to you three talk about it, you each have a kind of feeling of Will's point of, the tension is kind of mixed because you know what's happening, and if it would have been at the start of the season, it would have been a great episode. And then to your point of the framing device, I do think, and again, I haven't watched it, so maybe I'll agree with one of you when I do watch the show, but I think because Left Behind was, a year after the game came out, it's such an important part of Ellie's character development, because you can't do a season 2 of this show without going through Left Behind, because it ties so much into The Last of Us Part 2. So they kind of face the awkward situation of where do we put it? And I think from the sounds of things, doing it where they did, where Joel is hurt, is probably the best place for it. I can't imagine it really elegantly fitting into anywhere else. But at the same time, no, they had to do it, but also I feel like you could dedicate 2 whole episodes to what's about to happen in the game, at least from where I'm imagining we are. The next episodes...
what's to come?
Yeah, the next episode should be a doozy, but that part of the game could be 2 episodes or an episode and a half, and then dedicate the last episode to the rest of it. But it's a problem of how do you get this in there while keeping the flow of the original story, because it wasn't a part of the original story. I think that's, from what I'm hearing, maybe the best part or best place to do it. And it's such a, again, forgive me, I've not played Left Behind since it maybe came out around 9 years ago, but I just remember it being like, it leaving such an impression that you, even if they didn't do it, I feel like it'd be a waste not to. It's the like relationship between Riley and Ellie is like, it's still impactful, even though it's 2 hours of the total Last of Us tale. And I'm glad to hear they actually, went forward with it and didn't do the Disney thing of their game, but we're not going to explicitly tell you. They're just, there'll be a tiny little nod that we can take out to appeal to a terrible crowd. So I'm glad they at least went the full way with that and made it, did it the right way, I guess.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you, Scott, in terms of, well, you and your biggest fan in the YouTube chat, Gigi, at the moment, in that the next episode is going to be absolutely high stakes, high risk, very tense. So we'll definitely have to get you back. Yeah, there's the comment there. The next bit coming up. Oh, and it's gone again. Thanks, Will. We'll have to get you back next week for your thoughts on the game, on the TV show, rather. So one of the other things I noticed, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, whether or not this happens in the DLC, but obviously the end of this episode is Riley and Ellie sort of like accepting what they think is death to end with. And one artistic choice which I was really happy with is that you don't actually see Riley turn. Like Ellie's wants her last memory of Riley to be like the Riley she knew and loved. And I thought that was a very clever way that the episode sort of like ended quite suddenly as it did, so that there's no awkward moment where, you know, you have to see Riley attack Ellie in that way. Lewis and Will, what did you think about that? I thought it was very tastefully handled.
For me, it just left me a little bit confused because
Okay.
I mean, you know that. I mean, there's just so many questions, obviously, because you want to see the first moment when Ellie realizes she's not going to turn. You want to see that. You want to see the reaction. You want to know how that plays out. I mean, take for instance the third episode. It's all about how things end in that relationship. And then with this, it gives you everything up until the point that it ends. And no, I wanted to know what happened. You know, sorry.
You wanted to see Ellie having to potentially end the life of her best friend, even if she's a clicker.
That's the entire show, right? I mean, the entire turn of the show is this is what it would be like. It would just be people dying, people choosing to die, people realizing they have to die. That would be the entire world. And so that's what I expected to see.
Would that
Or
not
you
be
change
too?
it for
or
a
you
weird
change it-
kiss thing with a zombie.
Oh, you've heard about that, Scott, have you? Yeah.
I've watched that. That's all I've seen from the show.
Yeah. I guess the only reason I think maybe they went against it was because would it be too similar to when Henry changed and Joel and Ellie had to, you know, come into conflict with that sort of scenario? Lewis, did you like how the episode ended, or did it leave you a little bit cold, similar to Will? Oh, you're muted again, buddy.
It's not actual mic. Yeah, a bit of both. I think the way it ended was, like you said, tasteful, but at the same time, I did feel like I was left wanting maybe a little more in a different scenario. Because, like you said, you want to see like the clickers and the fighting and all that stuff, but then at the same time, it's not just like a non-stop killing and fighting show. It's also a drama. And I think it represented the relationship they had quite well, just the way it ended and stuff, how she wanted to have her last memory being a good one in a way.
Yeah.
So
Go on, Scott.
that is how it went at the game. I believe they were like sitting there accepting their fate. I believe they talk about shooting themselves at one point, but then they're like, no, we'll just rest together. It'll be nice. And then I think that's when it ends. I don't think there's any shenanigans with Riley turning and all that. But at the same time, I get that. I do think that's a good point, well made, that you want to see Ellie's first reaction to realizing she's immune. But at the same time, I think the show has enough misery, and this is a nice enough story. Like, it's a sad ending, but it's like a bittersweet kind of ending until Ellie obviously realizes that isn't the case. And I feel like there's maybe just enough misery in the show, and there's definitely going to be enough misery in the show when season 2 comes around, because that is one of the most oppressively distressing games I've ever played. So, a nice moment every so often is probably a good thing to have.
Yeah, I think Will made a good comparison between this episode and episode 3, which is probably still my top episode because it's such a beautiful standalone story told by itself. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, whereas I think from the perspective of someone who's played the game, every episode, whether or not it's hit on an existing beat in the game or done something new, it's been additive to the main last of the story that we know. Whereas this was very much a beat for beat for beat. This is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. So I'm at least knowing that. I think I was always going to go in disappointed, and the expectation of the show so far has kind of led me to believe that I will be getting more than just what's in the game. And this was the first episode where I really didn't get any of that. So it's at least good to know that from the perspective of Will and Lewis, who haven't yet played the game, that it works for them and that the emotional beats hit for them as well. Adam L in the YouTube chat, being providing quite the callback, I will say. I'm sorry, I'm just reliving the trauma. He says, what we really need is the mountain coming in and doing his thing to Joel. Hand orange covering eyes. I imagine that's that emoji right there. And what I'd say to that is, hasn't Pedro Pascal suffered enough? Hasn't he suffered enough?
I'll not say anything too much, but he's due to suffer a bit more. So look forward to
Again,
rest.
Scott the spoiler.
That's
this
not a
episode.
spoiler. I'm just saying Last of Us 2 is very sad and all the characters go through a lot.
Yeah.
So he's still, he's still due to go through a lot, and that's going to be petrol when he's not babysitting little gremlins. Does he still do that? I've not watched Mandalorian.
I think that's his second job, isn't it, Pedro Pascal? He's an actor first, the internet's daddy second, and then third, he's like, TV daddy for everybody. Yeah. Anyway, Lewis, Will, out of interest, did you watch the next time trailer for the next episode 8 of The Last of Us at all? Will's saying no.
No, I've avoided watching trailers for each episode. I don't see the point in it, to be honest, because I don't get how you can show an episode as a trailer. I feel like you give away too much because it's an episode which is not very long, max an hour. So you'll figure out half the storyline alone just from watching the trailer. So I like to stay away from them. But
fair enough.
Yeah,
Keeping yourself unsullied.
I go back and forth. Sometimes I watch them, sometimes I don't. Completely at random, and I don't know what inspires me to watch them and what doesn't. But I tend to avoid them. I haven't watched it this time now.
No worries. As I mentioned last week, though, we didn't get to talk about The Last of Us episode then. So just very briefly, seeing as we've got a rare appearance from producer Will on the podcast and Lewis is around too, how did you think? What did you make of Sam and Henry and how that story ended, and what did it tell you about the characters that you didn't know before previously? Putting you on the spot.
Well, there was no Sam and Henry in the last episode, was there? That was the episode before, right?
Oh, was it? Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I beg your pardon.
But I mean, I knew nothing about the characters. Obviously, I haven't played the game. Thought that episode was simmering down for a nice sort of calm finish, and then horrible ending. I mean, they just
caught you by surprise.
Yeah, and you just sort of put yourself in that position. You sort of think, because obviously, spoiler if you haven't already heard the many spoilers we've said, but if you start thinking, what would you do as an older brother in that situation? It's just horrific. But pretty intense. I do think there's sort of a structuring, not issue, but there's a lot of times when it feels like they've just sort of dragged and dropped segments from what is sort of a one continuous game and just sort of gone, that's the episode. So it feels like in terms of format or structure, there's not like a clean self-contained episode a lot of the time.
Yeah,
which
sorry, I've been hearing, it sounds very like Monster of the Week almost, not like actual Monster of the Week, but it's like, okay, here's the Tess episode, here's the Bill episode, here's the David episode, here's the Left Bank. Like, it seems very, like, to what you were saying, it seems very like they have a topic each week and then it's the next thing, and then sorry, go on.
I think that's probably more to tailor for the audience who haven't played the game, I guess, isn't it? Because if they hadn't had the episodes sort of delving into their backstory and stuff, I wouldn't have a clue what was going on because I haven't played the game. As if you have played the game, you probably don't need that backstory.
Yeah. I would say about the Sam and Henry stuff, though, Scott, when you eventually do get around to watching it, that was sort of broken into, it was almost the season's one and only two-parter so far. And you don't even really get to meet Sam and Henry until episode 5, I think it would be, because as Will quite rightly pointed out and corrected me, episode 6 was the Tommy stuff, played by Diego Luna, who I'm a big fan of, in addition to Pedro Pascal. But I think we'll sum up this discussion about the latest Last of Us episode with an earlier comment from Adam L. And you can lend your perspectives into this. It'd be a great way to conclude the conversation, I think. He says, here's an interesting one. As someone who hasn't watched the series or played the games, which one should I experience first? So we've touched upon it a little bit as part of this discussion. I get the impression that Will and Lewis don't feel like they're missing out on anything. But obviously, in the case of the current episode, I think this is the first time from someone who's played the game where I feel like I've not had a lot to be taken from it. But Will and Lewis, I guess you don't feel like you're missing out in the slightest, and you feel like you're getting a complete story, right?
Yeah, I guess it depends how you take things in. Do you prefer learning things by playing it in a game or watching it on a screen? Because For me, it's the latter, and getting those surprises, which I would have known if I played the game first. Getting those surprises in a film is a lot more shocking to me, as I feel like if I did that in a game, I just wouldn't feel that same like emotion towards it. That's just me personally. So I guess it depends on what you prefer doing.
Yeah, Will, would you play this, or you're happy
Yeah.
watching?
Yeah, it was sort of mixed. Part of me wants to sort of roam around like overgrown cityscapes and climb up sort of ivy-covered tower blocks and stuff like that. It sounds brilliant. That's the sort of thing I want to do. But I can't spend too long playing sort of bleak, dark environments in urban settings and fighting scary things. It's just it's too much for me. So mixed, I think. But I definitely feel like I'm not missing out. I mean, I don't feel like it's such a well-regarded game. Obviously, I want to play it.
Yeah, I'm kind of sat here wondering how Will and Lewis haven't managed to play the game since people have been banging on about it for 10 years.
Yeah.
And then Scott, how are you planning on tackling it? Are you waiting for the entire thing to come out, similar to our friends Gigi and Adam in the chat, or is there, have you just not gotten around to it yet? I've not found the time.
Yeah, I'm probably going to watch it once it's all done. Me and my partner are going to watch it. Now, she's not played the game, and I have, so kind of get both perspectives as I'm watching it, I suppose. I mean, on one hand, I think you probably do miss kind of some of the set dressing if you haven't played the game. But again, I haven't seen the show, so I can't exactly speak to that. But also experiencing a very good story that, let's be real, doesn't really need to be a game to be told. So experiencing that story without a bunch of tedious ladder puzzles or tedious pushing a piece of cardboard through the water is pretty good. And also, I'm interested to see how they deal with Last of Us 2, because that game is long.
Very long.
Like 2 seasons worth of show. But a way to condense Last of Us 2 down would be very appreciated, because, as Will said, it's hard to kind of sit and just, for what I think mine was, I looked at my save yesterday, it was about 30, 40 hours. And it was like just endless bleak. There's not a happy moment in that entire game, So maybe cutting that up a bit more and condensing it a bit more would do well for the sequel. But again, I can't speak to it, but I think either way seems valid. But I would probably play the game first.
Yeah, what I've heard from other people that have done both as well is that they very much work as like companion pieces, and that you get different things from it. Like particularly with the Bill and Frank stuff, as Will and Lewis, like I'm pretty sure there's no way you could do that in a game, at least in the style of The Last of Us. So my advice would be to choose either or. Like if you want to just soak up a story and sort of like immerse yourself in it without having to sort of like worry about what you yourself are doing, I'd say the TV show works just as well as the game. But having said that, both types of media will lend a different perspective on the other one, if that makes sense. And Scott, on your point in terms of like season 2, unless we go back to the days of like 22, 25 episode seasons, like I'm talking Lost or Hero style, I agree with you that season 2, which we know Neil Druckmann, the creative director of the game, has announced will follow the same narrative as the games. I think they have to split that into 2 seasons. But that will, I think Pedro Pascal will have some unique opportunities should they do that as well.
I'm quite excited to watch. I've not been spoiled, but I've heard enough about the show that makes me really excited to watch this Bill episode. Because you're right, that is something you can't do in the game. And I hear the first episode gives you a bit more Sarah than you got in the game.
Yeah.
So like I'm excited to watch it from that, but I'm excited to watch it from that as someone who has played the game as opposed to someone watching for the first time. So yeah, I think the parts of Last of Us 2 to kind of go back that were the best were these kind of more slow introspective moments, like the way the Bill episode sounds. So maybe that will end up being better as a TV show than it was as a game because of that. But that definitely is the stuff I'm looking forward to the most in the show as compared to the game.
Cool. Well, I think on that note, as we look ahead to future seasons of The Last of Us, we'll wave goodbye and bring this latest entry of the Mirror Gaming walkthrough to an end. But again, Lewis, Scott, Will, thank you so much for joining me. Particularly Scott for the Elden Ring stuff, and Lewis for the FIFA stuff as well. I know we were peppering you both with questions there, and I was sort of just mediating. Will was laughing to himself off screen to the side there, as one does. But yeah, thank you everyone who's been watching either live or on catch up via YouTube or Facebook. We'll be right back next week with more Mirror Gaming walkthrough. But until then, have a nice day, guys. Bye bye.